In the last episode, Emeka shattered the dark mirror and ran from the mansion. He carried Amora's phone full of hidden pictures that proved her secret horror. He fled through moonlit halls and out into the cool night air. By dawn he reached home and showed his aunt the proof. They went to the police, but the law would not help. Now Emeka and Aunt Nkairu faced the world again, carrying fear in their hearts and hope in their hands. Emeka woke before sunrise in his aunt's small bedroom. The first light slipped through the cracks in the curtains. He felt the weight of last night on his chest. He sat up and rubbed his eyes. His legs ached from running and hiding. He pressed his hand to the phone in his pocket, feeling its hard edge against his skin. He took a deep breath. Today they would try again. Aunt Nkairu stood by the door, holding a small bag. She wore her best skirt and blouse. Her eyes were tired but fierce. She packed water, snacks, and Emeka's school uniform that he never wore. "Here," she said softly, "take this." She handed him the folded scrap of paper with Amora's mansion address. Emeka tucked it into his pocket. His heart pounded as he watched her. They slipped out through the front gate together, side by side. The street was quiet. A single lamp glowed overhead. Emeka's sandals clicked on the pavement. Aunt Nkairu led him down the lane toward the main road. Neither spoke until they reached the corner. Then she squeezed his hand. "We will do this," she said. Emeka nodded. He tried to feel brave. The police station loomed ahead, a blocky building of grey concrete. A faded sign read Lagos Police Division. Emeka's throat went dry as they climbed the steps. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered. A long counter stretched across the room. Behind it, a bored clerk stared at a stack of files. Emeka swallowed and stepped forward. "Good morning," Aunt Nkairu began, her voice steady. "We need to speak to Detective Ifini." The clerk looked up, blinked, then pressed a button. He said into a handset, "Detective Ifini, room 2. Emeka and his aunt took seats on a hard wooden bench. Emeka's leg bounced as he waited. A tall man with close-cropped hair and a leather jacket entered. He carried a notepad and pen. His eyes were sharp, his face calm. Detective Ifini greeted them with a nod. "You said you have evidence?" he asked. His voice was polite but cool. Emeka stood and held out the phone. Aunt Nkairu spoke next. "Sir, this phone has pictures of children tied and hurt in that mansion. My nephew here saw them. We must stop her." She placed Amora's phone on the desk. Detective Ifini lifted it and swiped the screen. Emeka watched him scroll through the hidden folder. The detective's brow furrowed as he swiped past each photo. He tapped one and enlarged it. The boy on the screen lay still and pale. Detective Ifini sighed and set the phone down. "These photos are disturbing," he said softly, "but they could be edited. We have no body, no missing child report. And the suspect is gone, you say?" Aunt Nkairu's eyes filled with tears. "She is dangerous," she cried. "Please, you must do something." Detective Ifini leaned back and folded his arms. "I'm sorry," he said. "Without more proof, I can't open an official case. The courts need hard evidence. These images alone won't hold up." Emeka's face burned with frustration. He clenched his fists. "You saw them," he shouted. "Those kids are real." The detective held up a hand. "I believe something terrible happened," he said. "But my hands are tied. You should talk to the Child Protection Unit. They might help." Aunt Nkairu stood so fast her chair scraped. "Thank you, officer," she said tightly. "We will." She snatched the phone and paper, and they turned to go. Detective Ifini gave a polite nod. Emeka glared at him, but the detective did not look back. They left the station into the bright morning sun. Emeka's shoulders slumped. Aunt Nkairu wrapped her arm around him. "We will find help," she promised. Emeka forced a small nod. They walked down the steps and stepped onto the sidewalk. The city buzzed around them. Vendors shouted, selling bread and eggs. Cars honked as they passed. Emeka tried to clear his mind. He remembered the detective's words, "Hands are tied." He felt stuck. Aunt Nkairu steered him toward a bus stop. Let's plan our next move, she said quietly. They climbed onto a crowded bus and rode toward the market. Emeka sat by a window and watched the stalls rush past. Bright fruit, piles of rice, and colorful cloth flashed by. He wished they had stayed home, where it was safe. He wished he had never seen that mirror. The bus stopped near a row of small shops. Aunt Nkairu helped Emeka off. Come, she said. We will talk at home. They walked under a canopy of wires strung overhead. Emeka lifted his head and saw a shop window filled with toys. A yellow ball sat next to a row of plastic cars. He paused and looked closer. In the glass reflection, he saw his own face and his aunt's behind him. But just behind his head, he thought he saw a small girl's face. Pale, wide-eyed, her mouth open in a silent cry. Emeka jumped back. He blinked hard. The face vanished. He touched his shoulder, expecting to feel her. He felt nothing but his shirt. His heart pounded louder than the market noise. Aunt Nkairu reached for his hand. Emeka, she asked, are you all right? He shook his head and pointed at the window. What do you see? She asked, following his gaze. The window held only his reflection and the toys. No child's face. Aunt Nkairu frowned and turned to him. Did you feel something? She said softly. Emeka swallowed. His voice caught. I felt a hand on my shoulder. And I saw a face in the glass. His words trembled out. Aunt Nkairu pulled him close. It is all right, she said. It was the wind, or your mind tired. She patted his back. Emeka did not feel comforted. He looked back at the empty shop window. The yellow ball and the toy cars sat still. No child's face stared out. But Emeka knew he had not been imagining it. He felt a chill crawl up his spine. They walked on, but Emeka kept glancing over his shoulder. He clutched the phone in his pocket. He held the scrap of paper tight. He wondered how many pieces of that mirror still waited in the world. He feared the spirits behind it were not at rest. Aunt Nkairu led him toward home, but Emeka's mind stayed on the face in the glass. He whispered, "They remember me." His aunt did not hear. Emeka realized then that their fight was only beginning. The children's ghosts would not let him go. And as they turned the corner into their quiet street, Emeka slowed. He took a deep breath and readied himself. He would not run again. He would face whatever came next, for those children and for his own peace. The phone buzzed on the wooden table so suddenly that Emeka jumped. He had been sitting at lunch, staring out the kitchen window at a bright bird hopping on the fence. The buzz echoed again, sharp and urgent, cutting into the warm silence of the room. Aunt Nkairu, standing at the sink peeling potatoes, paused and glanced over her shoulder. Emeka's heart raced as he reached for the phone. His fingers shook when he turned it over. There on the screen was a tiny thumbnail of a photograph. He tapped it without thinking. Instantly a single image filled the screen. A small girl's face pressed against clear glass. Her eyes were wide with fear. The glass held tiny smudges, like the ghostly handprints of the trapped child. Emeka dropped his fork and pushed back his chair. Potatoes clattered in Aunt Nkairu's bowl. She hurried over, concern in her eyes. "Emeka, what is it?" she asked. He held up the phone so she could see. She gasped and put a hand to her mouth. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. Emeka shook his head. "It just came on my phone," he said. "No number. No message. Just that picture." He pressed the back button, but the photo stayed. He tapped again, hoping for words, a clue. Nothing appeared. Aunt Nkairu took the phone and studied the screen. The girl's face stared back at her. A single tear tracked down the child's cheek. Aunt Nkairu's chest tightened. She set the phone on the table. "This is not right," she said softly. "We must find out who sent it." Emeka felt cold all over. He remembered the nightmare of the mirror and the broken shards. He thought of the children behind that glass. Now one had appeared on his phone. He swallowed hard. "Do you think Amora sent it?" he asked. His voice trembled. Aunt Nkairu shook her head. "I do not know," she said. "But I know an old woman, Nena the herbalist. She knows about spirits and restless souls. We should go to her. Emeka stared at her. The herbalist, he said. You mean the woman who lives alone at the forest's edge? The one with the smoke and roots? Aunt Nkiru nodded. Yes. She helped me once when I was sick. She might know what this means. They stood in silence as the late afternoon light slanted through the window. A lone cricket chirped outside. Emeka's stomach knotted. He tried to think of a good reason to stay home. He had homework waiting on his desk. But this was more important than any school task. Aunt Nkiru wrapped a clean cloth around her waist. She took Emeka's hand. Come, she said. We will pack a few things and go. Emeka nodded. He placed the phone in his pocket and followed her to the bedroom. In the small room, Aunt Nkiru opened a wooden chest at the foot of her bed. She pulled out a dark shawl and draped it over Emeka's shoulders. She handed him a small tin with roasted groundnuts and a water bottle. Take these, she said, and a change of clothes. Emeka fetched his school shirt and trousers and folded them neatly. He tucked them under his arm. Aunt Nkiru picked up a woven basket lined with cloth. She placed in it a small clay pot of burning sage, a bundle of fresh basil, and a length of white cloth. These will help, she said. Nena uses them in her work. Emeka climbed into his sandals and slung the basket strap over his shoulder. They stepped outside into the cooling air. The sun dipped low behind palm trees. The street was quiet except for an old man sweeping leaves. Aunt Nkiru greeted him with a nod. Emeka breathed deeply. The day felt different now. The world seemed to hold its breath as they walked toward the dusty path that led out of town. Halfway there, Emeka paused. He touched his pocket and felt the phone vibrating again. Aunt Nkiru stopped and turned. Another message, she asked. Emeka pulled out the phone. This time a new image glowed on the screen. A boy's face pressed against a broken shard of mirror. His eyes were empty, his lips parted in a silent scream. Emeka closed his eyes. They are still trapped, he said. They are calling me. Aunt Nkiru placed both hands on his shoulders. We will help them, she said firmly. But we must be wise. She slipped the phone into her basket. They walked on, the path rising toward the edge of the forest. Tall grass brushed Emeka's knees. Cicadas buzzed like distant engines. The scent of basil and sage rose from the basket, mingling with damp earth. Emeka felt his fear and determination joined together in his chest. At the fork in the road, Aunt Nkiru pointed left. This way to Nena's hut, she said. Emeka followed down a narrow trail. Trees arched overhead, shading the path. Roots twisted like sleeping snakes across the ground. Emeka stepped carefully. Each crack of a twig sounded loud. After a short walk, they came to a clearing. In its center stood a small hut of woven reeds and thatch. Smoke curled from a clay chimney. Colorful ribbons and clay charms hung from the eaves. A half-circle of carved stones formed a ring around a central fire pit. Emeka recognized the place from Aunt Nkiru's stories. Aunt Nkiru lifted a hand and touched the ribbons. Nena keeps the spirits at bay with these, she said. We must be respectful. She stepped into the circle and set down the basket. Emeka followed. Suddenly the hut door opened, and an old woman emerged. Her hair was long and white. Her back was bent, but her eyes shone bright. She wore a robe of faded green cloth and carried a wooden staff. She fixed her gaze on Emeka and Aunt Nkiru. Welcome, my children, she said. Her voice was low and rumbling like distant thunder. I have sensed your need. Emeka felt a chill. He bowed his head. Aunt Nkiru set the basket at Nena's feet. Nena reached down and lifted the clay pot of sage. She held it high and let the smoke drift around Emeka and Aunt Nkiru. She closed her eyes and hummed a deep melody. The air grew still. The smoke formed shapes like dancing figures in the dim light. When Nena opened her eyes again, she pointed to Emeka. Show me the phone, she said. Aunt Nkiru handed it to her. Nena tapped the screen and the images flickered across the glass. The girl's face, then the boy's face. Nena nodded. These children still call, she said. They are trapped between worlds. They need one last echo of their home to free them. Emeka's eyes filled with tears. How do we give it to them? He asked. Nena set the phone down on a flat stone. She picked up a small knife from her belt and scored a pattern on the stone with holy symbols. She mixed basil leaves and ash from the fire pit into a paste and smeared it around the phone. We must call their names, she said, and place their memories on the wind. Emeka knelt beside her. Their names, he repeated. He had never learned any of their names. He felt panic rise. Nena looked at him kindly. Speak what you know, she said. Tell them of their favorite things. The laugh of a mother, the warmth of sun on their face, the taste of sweet fruit. Emeka closed his eyes and thought hard. He remembered the girl's hair tied with red ribbon. He remembered the boy's shy smile when Emeka had raided the kitchen for cookies long ago. He straightened and spoke softly. I know a girl who loved to swing on a tire. She laughed as the wind ran through her hair. And a boy who liked red apples, biting into them so the juice dripped down his chin. Aunt Nkairu placed a hand on his back. Nena nodded and began to chant. Her voice rose and fell in a steady rhythm. She waved her staff around the phone. The smoke grew thick and wound around the phone like arms. The air felt heavy. Emeka felt a tug at his heart. He closed his eyes and whispered more. Remember the sound of rain on the roof. The song of the cricket. The soft hug of your mother when you woke. The chant grew louder. The smoke swirled faster. Then, with a sudden gust, the smoke parted. A soft wind blew through the clearing. The phone screen went dark. Nena reached down and picked it up. She handed it to Emeka. It will not buzz again, she said. The message has been heard. Emeka opened the screen. It was blank. He closed his fist around the phone. Relief and sadness mixed in his chest. Aunt Nkairu smiled through tears. Thank you, Emeka said, his voice small. Nena nodded. The children walk on now, she said. But your path still bends to danger. Many shards remain. She tapped her staff on the ground. You must seek each one and give it a memory. Nena motioned them inside. The hut was hushed, save for the crackle of a small fire in the corner. Shelves held jars of roots, dried leaves, and clay vessels. In the center stood a low wooden table. Nena beckoned them forward. Aunt Nkairu pressed her hand to Emeka's back. Nena smiled gently and pointed to a silver bowl on the table. This bowl shows what the eyes cannot see, she said. She poured clear water into it, the surface still as glass. Emeka leaned close and peered in. At first, he saw only his own reflection and Aunt Nkairu's beside him. Then the surface rippled, though no breeze stirred. Behind their faces, pale shapes flickered, children's faces, hollow and sad, pressing tight against invisible glass. Emeka gasped and stumbled back. Aunt Nkairu caught his arm. They look hungry for home, Emeka whispered. Nena nodded. They remain bound to shards of the mirror you broke. Each fragment holds a soul. She tapped the bowl with a wooden spoon. The water glowed faintly, and the children's faces shifted, as if begging. Emeka's chest ached. How many? Aunt Nkairu asked, voice barely audible. Nena closed her eyes. More than you freed. The mirror shattered into many pieces, some lost, some buried, some hidden. Each shard still traps one child. Emeka's hands tightened into fists. We must free them all, he said. Nena studied Emeka's face. To do this, you need a cleansing ritual. You must gather every shard and return it here, to this bowl. She lifted the bowl and held it at eye level. When you place each fragment in the water, the soul will slip free. Aunt Nkairu exchanged a worried glance with Emeka. But be warned, Nena continued, each shard carries pain. You may feel their memories, fear, sorrow, cold. You must be strong. Emeka swallowed. I will do it, he said. Nena set the bowl down and picked up a faded cloth. She unfolded it to reveal a map drawn in ash and charcoal. This shows the places I suspect shards lie. A broken window at the old tea house. A flowerbed at the abandoned school. Beneath the stones of the river ford. These are starting points. She tapped each spot in turn. Emeka traced the dark lines with his finger. Aunt Nkairu's brow furrowed. How will we know a shard when we see it? Nena smiled and reached into a clay jar. She pulled out a handful of small, round seeds painted white. These seeds will glow when they touch mirror glass, she said. Tie them in a pouch. When you search, they will tremble near the shard. Emeka took the seeds with trembling fingers and tucked them into his bag. Nena reached beneath the table and produced 2 wooden wands wrapped in cloth. These will protect you, she said. Hold one when you face the shard's curse. The cloth was dipped in holy water. Emeka took a wand. Its wood was warm. Aunt Nkairu took the other. Nena's eyes shone with pride and sorrow. She pointed to the bowl. Now, practice the chant. She rose and bowed her head. Softly, she spoke words Emeka could barely repeat. A slow, rising melody in an ancient tongue. The chant filled the hut, pulsing like a heartbeat. Emeka imitated her, voice trembling, until the syllables rolled off his tongue. Aunt Nkairu joined, firming her tone. When the chant ended, the silence felt sacred. Nena smiled. You have learned much, she said. Tomorrow, you begin your journey. She waved aside the map and seeds. For now, rest here. Emeka sat on a simple stool. Aunt Nkairu crouched beside him. Outside, the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky red. That night, Emeka couldn't sleep. He lay on his mat, hearing Nena's soft snore. He thought of the children's faces in the bowl. He felt their pleas echo in his heart. He closed his eyes and saw shards glinting under moonlight, the broken edges waiting for him. Morning came with birdsong and the smell of damp earth. Emeka rose and found Nena already awake by the fire. She stirred a pot of water. Aunt Nkairu prepared simple porridge. Nena ladled the hot grain into 3 wooden bowls and handed one to Emeka. Eat, she said softly. You need strength. Emeka sipped the warm porridge. It filled his belly but not his worry. Where do we start? He asked. Nena pointed to the map on the wall. The old tea house first, she said. Go before noon, when fewer people walk by. The window lies smashed. The shard may be buried in the sill. Aunt Nkairu packed the seeds pouch into her belt. Emeka slung the basket over his shoulder. Inside lay the silver bowl wrapped in cloth, the map, seeds, and protective wands. Nena stepped outside with them. The clearing glowed in the early light. She held out a small cloth bag. Take these herbs, she said. When you find a shard, crumble them over it. It will break its power and ease the soul. She handed the bag to Aunt Nkairu. Emeka bowed his head. Thank you, he said. Nena reached into her robe and pressed her palm to his forehead. A warm glow spread through him. Courage, child, she whispered. Then she turned and slipped back into her hut, closing the door gently behind her. Emeka and Aunt Nkairu stood in the clearing. The birds called overhead. The path home stretched behind them. Before them lay a new day of danger and hope. Emeka took a deep breath. He felt the weight of the silver bowl at his back and the wooden wand in his hand. Aunt Nkairu took his arm. We walk together, she said. Emeka nodded. They stepped onto the path, moving toward the first shard, their steps strong and their hearts open to the children's cries. And so began their quest, to track down every mirror shard, to call each child by memory, and to set their souls free, guided by the wisdom of the herbalist who saw the unseen and taught them to believe. The moon hung low as Emeka and Aunt Nkairu crept toward the old mansion. Its broken windows stared like dark eyes. The front gate lay open, rusted hinges squeaking in the wind. A single lantern swung near the door, its flicker casting tall shadows across cracked stone steps. Emeka's heart thumped. His bag weighed heavy with seeds and herbs. Aunt Nkairu held her wooden wand tight. They slipped through the gate and paused. The garden was overgrown. Thorns tangled rose bushes, and vines crawled up the walls. Petals lay on the ground like fallen stars. Aunt Nkairu touched Emeka's arm. Stay close, she whispered. He nodded, breath caught in his chest. They crossed the yard in quiet steps. Emeka's sandals whispered on mossy stones. A distant owl hooted. Aunt Nkairu lifted her wand and pressed a finger to her lips. They came to a shattered window high above. Glass shards glittered in the lantern's glow. The window frame hung crooked, its wood black with age. Emeka reached into his bag and pulled out the pouch of seeds. He held it in his palm. The seeds trembled. He knelt by the flower bed beneath the window. Roses drooped, their petals wilted. He shook the pouch. One seed jumped free and rolled toward a pile of dirt. The others stilled, as if waiting. Aunt Nkairu knelt beside him. She carried the clay bag of herbs. She brushed aside dirt from under a rose root. Emeka watched the seed's shell begin to glow, faint as a firefly. He gasped softly. Aunt Nkairu smiled. "Good," she breathed. "You found it." Emeka's fingers closed around a small, curved shard. It gleamed like a fallen piece of mirror. He held up the seed in his other hand. It shone brighter. He felt a hush in the air. He pressed the herb paste onto the shard with a finger. The darkness around the shard lightened. A soft, broken voice echoed in his mind, "Mama." He blinked. Aunt Nkairu's hand touched his shoulder. "Place it in the bowl," she whispered. Emeka stood and turned, carrying the shard carefully. He nearly stumbled on tangled roots. He kept his eyes on the shard's dull sparkle. They exited the garden and retraced their steps toward the clearing where Nena's hut waited. The trees loomed close, their branches brushing their shoulders. Emeka felt the shard's weight heavy in his pocket. Aunt Nkairu led him across the open yard, past the gate's rusted remains. The mansion's walls seemed to watch, silent and still. When they reached the clearing, Nena's door creaked open. She emerged holding the silver bowl. Her eyes glowed in the lantern light. Emeka stepped forward and held out the shard. Nena took it gently and placed it in the water. The shard hissed as it hit the surface and sank. The water rippled, and a small mist rose. Emeka watched as the mist formed a child's face for a moment, smiling, then fading. The bowl grew still again. Emeka felt relief and sorrow. Aunt Nkairu laid a hand on his back. "One more free," she said softly. Emeka nodded, wiping his eyes. Nena guided him to a low stool. She pressed her palm to his forehead and murmured a soft chant. Ember sparks rose in the bowl, then died. Nena set the bowl aside. "Good work," she said. "But more shards lie where they fell." Emeka clenched his jaw. "Where next?" he asked. Nena unrolled the charcoal map on a flat stone. She pointed to a building marked with a single X, "The old school at the riverbank," she said. A shard slipped under the floorboards. "You must hurry before dawn." Aunt Nkairu lifted the bag of seeds. "Let us go," she said. Emeka tucked the shard's memory in his heart and rose. Outside, the wind sighed through the trees. Emeka set his jaw. He would not rest until each child was free. They raced down the forest path. Emeka led with the lantern, its glow bobbing. The map guided them under fallen logs and over a shallow creek. He felt the weight of each moment, each heartbeat. His legs burned, but he pushed on. Aunt Nkairu followed close, her wand raised in readiness. The school building stood on a raised bank beside the river. Its paint peeled, and boards hung loose. Moonlight filtered through broken windows, glinting on rotting floorboards. Emeka paused at the door. He heard water lapping far below. A frog croaked. The air smelled damp. Aunt Nkairu nodded. Emeka stepped inside. The floor creaked under his sandals. Rows of old desks lay toppled. Chalk dust ran thick across the floor. He felt the seeds tremble in his pocket. He opened the pouch and listened. One seed bounced free and rolled toward a gap in the floor. Emeka dropped to his knees. He pressed his face close to the boards. Through cracks he saw a silver flash. He reached in and felt a smooth edge. He pushed aside debris and pulled out a shard. It cut his fingertip. He hissed and pressed the herb paste to the ribbon of blood. The seed in his hand glowed bright. He picked up the shard and held it aloft. A creak sounded behind him. Emeka froze. He glanced back and saw Aunt Nkairu at the doorway, wand raised. A shape flickered in the hall's gloom. An owl perched on a beam. Emeka laughed softly with relief and waved her forward. They backed out of the room together. The shard hummed in Emeka's pocket. Aunt Nkairu guided him away from the building. He clutched the map, heart pounding. They climbed the bank toward a narrow path. Dawn's pale light touched the treetops. They reached the clearing just as the first bird's song rang out. Emeka handed the shard to Nena, waiting by the bowl. She placed it in the water. The shard sank with a soft laugh, and the wrapped mist lifted, a boy's small hand waving goodbye. Emeka watched until the surface was still. Nena laid a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Too freed," she said, voice warm. Emeka exhaled. His legs shook, but he felt stronger. Aunt Nkairu gathered the map and seeds. "We rest now," she said. Emeka nodded. They sat on smooth stones as the sky turned pink. Emeka leaned back and closed his eyes. He tasted the cool air. He thought of the children's faces freed from the shards. He felt their thanks wrap around him, gentle as a breeze. The three rose as the sun crested the trees. Emeka felt hope glow inside him. They walked back along the path, their steps soft on the earth. The day had begun, and Emeka knew their journey would continue until the last shard was found. Aunt Nkairu's radio crackled with news as she stirred porridge in the kitchen. The familiar sound of Nena's chant still echoed in her mind, but the news froze her hand. "Escaped from the collapsed mansion last week," the announcer said. "Slay Queen Amora is alive and under guard at Riverbend Hospital, though authorities say she shows signs of mental distress." Aunt Nkairu set down her spoon, eyes wide. Emeka, spoon halfway to his mouth, looked at her. "Aunt," he said softly, "did you hear that?" She nodded, voice tight. "She's alive." The room felt still. Emeka's heart hammered. They had freed children's souls, but Amora, once broken, lived on. Now her power was gone, but her mind was sharp with anger. Aunt Nkairu mustered a small smile. "We knew," she said. "She will hunt you." Emeka's fork clattered on his plate. "We must be careful." Later that morning, Emeka and Aunt Nkairu walked toward the market. Dust danced in the sun. People shouted, selling yams and tomatoes. Emeka kept his head down, eyes on the dirt path. Aunt Nkairu glanced over her shoulder. "She might watch everyone," she said. Emeka nodded, trying to swallow his fear. They paused by a fruit stall. Aunt Nkairu picked up a mango. Its skin was red and gold. She paid the vendor and handed Emeka the fruit. "Eat," she said. "You need strength." He bit into the mango. Juice dripped down his chin, tart and sweet. For a moment, he forgot danger. Then he spotted her. Across the crowded market, a tall woman stood by a spice stall. Her hair fell in braids, but her face was older, sharper. Emeka's heart froze. He blinked, and she was gone. He turned to Aunt Nkairu. "I thought I saw her," he whispered. Aunt Nkairu followed his gaze. "People move fast here," she said. "Keep walking." They moved on, weaving past carts of cassava and cloth. Emeka's eyes darted over every face. Farmers, children, travelers. He felt as if Amora's eyes watched him from every corner. He shivered. "Let's go see Nena," he said. "She will help us know what to do." Aunt Nkairu agreed, and they left the market behind. Nena's hut sat calm among the trees. Smoke curled from her chimney. The chant of last night's ritual still hummed in the air. Nena greeted them with a nod. "The shards you've freed shine bright," she said. "But this morning, my bowl clouded. A new peace stirs." Emeka's stomach knotted. Aunt Nkairu laid out the seeds and map. Nena studied them and frowned. "The shard lies near her hospital," she said. "But you cannot go there. Instead, she may come to you." Emeka's mouth went dry. "What should we do?" he asked. Nena's eyes softened. "Stay hidden," she said. "Use the city's shadows." Aunt Nkairu hugged Emeka. "We will," she said. Emeka nodded, though his mind churned. That afternoon, Emeka had to fetch medicine from the clinic. Aunt Nkairu gave him the list and a small purse. Inside, the nurse handed over bottles of cough syrup and bandages. Emeka thanked her and turned to leave. In the narrow corridor, he passed a row of chairs. A face at the end caught his eye. Amora sat alone, her back to him. She wore a plain hospital gown, but the curve of her shoulders was strong, her stance unbroken. A single nurse stood by the door, distracted by a clipboard. Emeka froze. Amora's head turned slowly. Their eyes met in the bright light. Her gaze flared. Fear and rage swirled in her dark eyes. She smiled, a thin, sharp smile. "Emeka," she said, voice soft but clear. The nurse glanced up and then looked away again. Emeka's feet felt rooted. He dropped the medicine on the floor. "Amora," he stammered. She slid off the chair and stepped toward him. Aunt Nkairu's voice echoed in his memory, "Stay hidden." But his legs moved before he could think. He stood frozen. "Why are you here?" he asked, voice shaking. Amora's smile faded. She reached out, her fingers trembling. "I want to finish this," she whispered. Emeka's heart pounded so hard he thought he would collapse. He realized then, she had come here to find him. He backed away, but the corridor was narrow. The nurse still watched elsewhere. Emeka swallowed and forced out, "You can't." He cut off as Amora's hand closed around his wrist. Her grip was cold. He gasped and tried to pull free. "Let go." Aunt Nkairu's voice called from the clinic door. She stood there, arms wide as if to catch him. Amora's eyes flicked to Aunt Nkairu. She released Emeka's wrist and turned her head. "This isn't over," she said. Her voice echoed down the corridor. Then she slipped past the nurse and vanished into the hall. Emeka stumbled back into his aunt's arms. He pressed his face against her skirt and trembled. She held him tight. "It's okay," she whispered. "She's gone." Emeka looked up, tears on his cheeks. "She saw me," he said. "She knows where I live." Aunt Nkairu closed her eyes. "We must move again," she said. "The children need us safe." They left the clinic and hurried back through the busy streets. Emeka clutched the medicine tight. His mind raced with memories of Amora's gaze and cold hand. Aunt Nkairu led him through alleys and side roads until they reached a small guest room at a friend's home. They slipped inside and locked the door. Aunt Nkairu lit a lamp. Its soft glow filled the simple room. Emeka sank onto the cot, exhausted and afraid. Aunt Nkairu set the medicine on a small table and knelt beside him. "She came for you," she said softly. "You did well to stay calm." Emeka rubbed his wrist. "I thought she wanted to kill me," he said. Aunt Nkairu shook her head. "She wants power, not death. She needs your fear." Emeka frowned. "What does that mean?" Aunt Nkairu reached into her bag and pulled out the silver bowl. She poured water in and set it on the floor. "Show me what you feel," she said. Emeka sat on the edge of the cot and closed his eyes. Aunt Nkairu lifted the bowl and held it before his face. The water rippled once. In its surface, Emeka saw Amora's face, older and gaunt, eyes wild. A faint handprint pressed from behind. Emeka gasped. Aunt Nkairu held the bowl steady. "Her shard must be near," she said. "But here, we cannot lure her. We must draw her away." Emeka opened his eyes. "Then what?" he asked. Aunt Nkairu stood and took his hand. "We will go to the sacred grove," she said. "Under the full moon, we will make our stand." Emeka nodded, hope and dread twisting inside him. "I'm ready," he said. Aunt Nkairu led him to the door and peered out into the street. "We leave at nightfall." Emeka watched the last light fade from the window. He felt the city's hum alone. But with Aunt Nkairu by his side, he felt less afraid. He took a deep breath. He would face Amora again, this time not as prey, but as protector of the freed souls. And he would not run. The fire in Nena's hearth glowed bright, casting dancing shadows on the hut walls. Emeka and Aunt Nkairu knelt on the clay floor, their eyes fixed on the low wooden table between them. On the table lay a bowl of clear water, a bundle of sacred roots wrapped in cloth, a pitcher of blessed water, and a bundle of cassia leaves tied with white string. Nena stood nearby, her white hair catching the firelight, her eyes calm and steady. "Listen well," Nena said, her voice soft but sure. She lifted the bundle of roots. These are the roots of the druid tree. They bring truth and strength. We will boil them in the water. She poured the pitcher of blessed water into a clay pot over the embers. This water holds the power of the grove, she said. When the roots steep, their power will fill the water. Emeka's heart pounded. He leaned forward and watched as Nena dropped the roots into the pot. Steam curled up in thin wisps. The water hissed softly. Aunt Nkairu closed her eyes and breathed in the scent of earth and bark. Emeka felt a thrill of fear and hope in his chest. Nena stirred the roots with a wooden spoon. Now, she said, we chant the words of opening. She stepped back and raised her hands. Emeka and Aunt Nkairu sat up straight. Nena began a low chant in the old tongue. Sai Byra Ei Ondu, Sai Byra Ei Ondu. Her voice rose and fell like a wave. Emeka felt the walls hum. He repeated the chant quietly, voice trembling at first. Sai Byra Ei Ondu. He peeked at Aunt Nkairu. She nodded, her face serious. They chanted together, their voices joining Nena's, weaving loud and soft notes. Emeka closed his eyes and felt the fire's warmth, the root's strength, and the water's power swirl around him. When the chant ended, Nena tipped a few cassia leaves into the boiling pot. The leaves hissed and released a sweet smell. Cassia for binding, Nena said. It will hold the ceremony safe. She stirred again, then lifted the lid. The water glowed pale gold. Emeka stared, feeling as if tiny lights danced in the steam. It is ready, Nena said. She set the lid down and handed Aunt Nkairu the wooden spoon. Stir with the cassia bundle, she instructed. Aunt Nkairu dipped in the spoon and swirled the leaves. The water shimmered and glowed brighter. Emeka felt a warmth spread through his hands, up his arms, and settle in his chest. Nena moved behind them and laid a hand on each shoulder. Now, we forge the ritual, she said. She pointed to 2 clay cups on the table. Emeka, you will pour first. Emeka swallowed and stood. He picked up a cup and held it trembling. Nena nodded. Emeka lifted the cup and poured the glowing water into the silver bowl on the low stool. The water trickled in with a soft hiss. The bowl trembled. Tiny lights flickered on its surface. Emeka watched as a mist rose, shaped like the girl's small hand. The mist drifted away, leaving the bowl still. Emeka's legs shook. He sank back onto his knees. Aunt Nkairu squeezed his hand. He closed his eyes, breathing hard. Aunt Nkairu rose and took her turn. She filled a cup and poured. The bowl glowed again. A small mist shaped like the boy's face floated up and vanished. Aunt Nkairu sat down, her eyes bright with tears. Nena clapped softly. 2 more freed, she said. 4 left. Emeka looked at the silver bowl. He felt pride and sorrow together. Nena turned to the table and picked up a small packet of white powder. This is ground white clay, she said. It will mark the space and protect you. She traced a circle around the bowl with the clay dust. The line gleamed in the firelight. Now, she said, we bind ourselves to this rite. Nena unfolded a length of white cloth. She tucked it into Emeka's belt and then into Aunt Nkairu's. When the full moon rises, she said, you will stand in the grove, this bowl before you. You will speak, pour, and free the souls. She stepped back and placed her staff beside the bowl. Emeka's mind spun. He pressed his hand to the cloth at his waist. It felt cool but strong. He looked at Aunt Nkairu. She straightened her spine and wiped her eyes. We can do this, she whispered. Emeka nodded, though his heart thudded. Nena closed her eyes and chanted again, a shorter melody, Indai Hel Sudo, Indai Hel Sudo. Emeka and Aunt Nkairu joined. The chant surged through the hut, then faded into silence. Nena opened her eyes. Your voices are clear, she said. Your hearts are true. You are ready. Emeka rose and stretched his legs. The hut felt small, but safe. He walked to the bowl and knelt. He touched the silver rim. For them, he said softly. Aunt Nkairu knelt beside him. Always for them, she breathed. Nena stepped outside. The night was clear, the wind gentle. She called them. Emeka and Aunt Nkairu followed her into the clearing. The familiar scent of sage wrapped around them again, and fireflies blinked at the grove's edge. The carved stones stood like silent watchers. Nena stood in the center and lifted her staff. "Soon," she said, "I will meet you here." She pointed to the path that led deeper into the dark woods. "Walk this path under the full moon. Do not stray." Emeka touched her hand. "We will not," he said. Aunt Nkairu shaded her eyes and looked at the sky. A sliver of moon had just risen. It shone pale and bright. Emeka felt the pulse of magic in that light. He thought of the children still waiting behind shards. He thought of Amora's desperate need for power. Nena turned back to the hut and vanished inside. The clearing felt empty, but the fireflies glimmered. Aunt Nkairu and Emeka stood together in the circle of stones. The bowl lay on a flat rock between them. The herbs, the roots, the cassie, all lay ready. Aunt Nkairu squeezed Emeka's hand. "Tomorrow night," she said. Emeka nodded. He closed his eyes and breathed in the night air. He felt the words of the chant settle in his mind. He felt the warmth of the blessed water in his veins. They walked back to the hut in soft steps. Emeka's head felt clear and heavy with promise. Aunt Nkairu glanced at him. "Rest now," she said. He followed her inside. The hymn of the fire greeted them. Nena was asleep by the hearth, the herbs and roots arranged on a shelf. Aunt Nkairu laid out blankets on the floor. Emeka curled up beside her. He pressed his temple to the wooden wall and thought of the moonlight path. Aunt Nkairu closed her eyes. Emeka tried to sleep but could not. He recalled Nena's words, "Your voices must be true." He repeated the chant quietly in his mind. "Sae Byra ei ondu. Indai hel sudo." He whispered until his words carried him into dreams. In the dreams, children's hands reached from silver shards, and Emeka held them, guiding them home. When he woke, the moon had moved. He opened his eyes to Aunt Nkairu's gentle breathing. He sat up and rubbed his arms. The night felt alive. The day of the ritual had come. Emeka rose and dressed. He strapped on his wand and tied the white cloth. Aunt Nkairu stood and offered him water. He drank and felt the cool strength fill him. She led him to the door and pointed down the path. The full moon glimmered on the trail. Emeka took a deep breath. He stepped outside and felt the earth firm beneath his feet. Aunt Nkairu followed. The circle of stones lay ahead, and the silver bowl waited. Tonight, they would call out, pour the blessed water, and free the last souls. Tonight, they would face Amora one last time. And so, hand in hand, Emeka and Aunt Nkairu walked into the moonlit woods, their hearts set on freeing the children and ending the Slay Queen's curse forever. Aunt Nkairu felt the air pulse around her as she stepped into the circle of stones. The silver bowl lay on the flat rock at the center, its water still and shining. The familiar scent of sage wrapped around her, steadying her breath. She glanced at Emeka, who stood beside her, the bundle of empty seed pouches at his waist. Above them, the full moon spilled pale light through the tall trees. The wind whispered through the leaves, as if waiting. A soft snapping of twigs made them turn. Amora emerged from the shadows, her figure tall and tense. She wore a dark cloak and clutched a pendant of gleaming mirror shard. Torchlight caught the pendant's edge, sending sparks across her angry eyes. She stepped into the circle, her voice low and strong. "You freed some," she said, "but the power you stole belongs to me. Give me back those shards." Emeka squared his shoulders. "They are not yours," he called. His voice carried over the clearing. "They belong to the children." He lifted his wooden wand. The fire pit behind the bowl glowed red. Aunt Nkairu hefted her own wand, her face calm. Amora's lips curled into a sneer. "You chase ghosts," Amora said. "I will take back what is mine." She raised the shard pendant. A cold light pulsed from it, and the wind stilled. Emeka felt a chill slip down his spine. He took a careful step forward. "We will end this tonight," he said. "No more pain." Amora laughed, a harsh sound that rang among the stones. She swung the pendant in a slow circle. Dark sparks flew, and the torch flames bent away. Then Aunt Nkairu stepped forward, her voice clear. "Nena's words will bind you," she cried. She held the wand high and sprinkled drops of blessed water from the cassie-studded vessel. The water arced through the air, landing on Amora's cloak. The drops sizzled and vanished, leaving silver lines on the fabric. Amora's cloak shivered. She hissed and lunged at Aunt Nkairu. Emeka dashed between them, raising the silver bowl of water. "Stop!" he shouted the chant Nena had taught them, "Sai Byra ei ondu." His voice rose and fell like the wind. The bowl glowed faintly with golden light. Amora's forward motion faltered. She stared at the bowl, eyes wide. Emeka set the bowl down and drew the first shard from his pouch. He gripped it tight. "By the children's memory, I free you," he said. He hurled the shard into the fire pit. It hissed and flew into the flames. The fire roared, sending sparks skyward. Amora staggered back, her pendant flashing a broken light. She pressed a hand to her chest, where her muscles had once been strong. Aunt Nkairu moved around the bowl, chanting softly, "Indai hel pseudo." She sprinkled more blessed water in a circle. The air warmed and rustled the leaves. Emeka knelt and picked the second shard with careful fingers. He spoke clearly, "Remember the swing and the apple." He threw it into the fire pit. The flames leapt and the wind howled through the trees. Amora's cloak whipped around her as if alive. "You cannot stop me." Amora screamed. She flung the pendant toward Emeka. A shard of mirror spun off and shot across the clearing. Emeka dove forward, catching it before it hit the ground. It cut his palm, but he held on. The small cut burned, and he pressed the herb paste to his hand. The pain stung, but made him sharper. He rose, shaking off the pain. Amora charged, crouching low as a wolf. Emeka braced himself. The firelight played on her face, twisting her features. She swung at Emeka with the pendant. He dodged and raised the wooden wand. He thrust it forward and cried, "By the roots and the cassia, be bound." A ripple of power flashed from the wand's cloth-wrapped tip. Amora's movement slowed, as if caught in molasses. Emeka snatched the third shard from his pouch. "Remember the mother's hug," he said, voice steady. He flung the shard high. It spun through the air and dropped into the fire pit. The pit exploded in a burst of heat and sound. Amora fell to her knees, eyes closed, clutching her pendant. The wind shrieked, then died away. Aunt Nkairu knelt beside Emeka. She picked up the fourth shard, her voice gentle, "Remember the rain and the song." She threw it into the flames. The shard turned to sparks and vanished. The fire burned brighter, lighting every corner of the grove. The stones glowed, and Emeka felt the ground tremble. Amora looked up, her face pale and drawn. She raised the pendant one last time, trembling, but her power was broken. Emeka stepped forward, wand in hand, shouting the final chant, "Sai Byra ei ondu. Indai hel pseudo." His voice rang clear and true. He reached into his pouch for the last two shards. With a final cry, Emeka hurled both fragments together. They hit the fire pit and sank. A burst of golden light shot up, filling the grove. The trees shuddered as wind roared among the branches. A chorus of voices, soft and clear, rose around them. Whispers of thank you, hope, and freedom. Amora let out a long, hollow scream. The pendant cracked in her hand and dropped to the ground. She collapsed backward, her body folding in on itself. The cloak slipped off, revealing her frail frame. Emeka and Aunt Nkairu watched, hearts pounding. The fire settled back into glowing coals. The wind stilled. The voices faded into the night. Emeka knelt and picked up the pendant's shard. He held it to the bowl's edge. The silver bowl caught the moonlight and glowed softly. The shard crumbled to dust in his hand. Aunt Nkairu moved to Amora's side. She knelt and touched her cheek. Amora's breathing was shallow but steady. Aunt Nkairu closed her eyes and whispered a short chant. Emeka stood and swept his wand in a circle around the fallen queen. He murmured the words that would seal the grove's peace. When he finished, the clearing was silent. Only the night creatures stirred in the underbrush. Emeka approached Amora cautiously, wand lowered. He looked at her face, older now, hollowed by her own darkness. Emeka felt no fear, only pity. He knelt and placed the shard of pendant dust into the bowl. The bowl's water shimmered once and then lay still. Aunt Nkiru stood and offered Emeka her hand. He took it, eyes bright with relief. The two of them walked to the bowl and stood side by side. Above, the full moon shone down, its light now calm and soft. "You did well," Aunt Nkiru said, voice filled with pride. Emeka nodded, though his voice caught. "We did it together," he said. They looked at Amora one last time. She lay quiet, her battle over. Emeka turned to the circle of stones. He raised his head and spoke softly, so only the wind could hear. "Rest now, children. You are free." The trees rustled once, like a gentle applause. Then Emeka and Aunt Nkiru stepped out of the sacred grove, leaving behind the silver bowl and the empty fire pit. The night held its breath as they walked away, their hearts light and brave, knowing the last shards were gone and the children's souls safe at last. Emeka and Aunt Nkiru emerged from the grove a moment later, hands still clasped. The moon hung low and tired, giving way to the sun's first glow. Emeka's legs felt stiff from standing in battle, but his chest felt light. Aunt Nkiru let go of his hand and stretched her arms toward the sky. "Look," she said, "the stars fade and the day begins." Emeka lifted his face, watching pink and gold paint the horizon. A single bird sang near the treetops, its song clear and sweet. They walked in silence along the narrow path, the earth cool under their feet. Emeka glanced back at the circle of stones, now empty and still. "Aunt," he said, "do you think the children can finally rest?" Aunt Nkiru squeezed his shoulder. "Yes," she replied, "their homes await them beyond this world." Emeka nodded, imagining their laughter, their tears of joy, as they returned to peace. He felt a gentle breeze brush his cheek, as if the breeze itself carried their thanks. By the time they reached Nena's hut, dawn had painted the sky bright. Nena stood at the door, a soft smile on her face. "You have done well," she said. "Tonight the children's spirits will fade into morning light." Emeka knelt and bowed his head. "Thank you for guiding us," he said. Aunt Nkiru met Nena's gaze. "We could not have done this alone," she added. Nena waved her hand. "Go now. Rest. The world moves on." At home, Aunt Nkiru set the kettle on the stove while Emeka dropped his pack by the door. The small house smelled of fresh water and wood smoke. Emeka watched as Aunt Nkiru placed a bowl of pap and honey on the table. "Eat," she said. "You need strength for the day." Emeka picked up his spoon and took a slow bite. The sweet porridge tasted of safety and warmth. He closed his eyes, savoring the moment. "So," Aunt Nkiru began between sips of her own pap, "what will you do now that the danger has passed?" Emeka tilted his head. "I want to go back to school," he said. "I want to learn and grow." Aunt Nkiru's eyes shone. "I will talk to the teacher," she said. "They will welcome you." Emeka smiled, imagining the classroom, the chalk on the board, the sound of friends greeting him. He felt hope bloom in his chest. They cleared the dishes together. Emeka stacked bowls, Aunt Nkiru rinsed them. Their movements were easy and calm. Outside, the sun rose higher, banishing shadows. Emeka stepped to the window and watched the street come alive with people. He thought of Amora, lying safe under Nena's care, and felt no anger, only sadness for a life broken by dark choices. He turned and found Aunt Nkiru watching him. "You have mercy in your heart," she said softly. "That is your greatest strength." Emeka nodded. "I only wish she could have found another way," he replied. Aunt Nkiru placed her hand over his. "Sometimes we cannot choose the path," she said. "We can only choose how we walk it." Emeka drew in a breath and smiled at her wisdom. After breakfast, Emeka found his school uniform neatly pressed on his bed. He had not worn it in many days. He pulled it on, button by button, feeling its neat fabric settle on his shoulders. Aunt Nkiru handed him his satchel. Inside was a notebook and pencil. "For your lessons," she said. Emeka hugged the satchel. "Thank you," he whispered. Before leaving, Emeka knelt by his bed and noticed a small shape on the pillow. He reached out and picked it up. In his hand lay a single fragment of mirror, smooth, silver, and cold. His breath froze. He stared at the shard as if it might speak. Aunt Nkairu appeared in the doorway. Emeka held up the shard. "Aunt," he said, voice trembling, "look." Aunt Nkairu's eyes widened. She stepped forward and took the shard gently. She turned it over in her hand, watching sunlight catch its edge. "One last piece," she said, "a remnant of what was." Emeka felt a jolt of fear and wonder. He thought they had freed every soul. "Why is it here?" he asked. Aunt Nkairu tucked the shard into a small cloth pouch. "Some dangers linger," she replied. "Some pieces hide where we least expect them. But now you know how to find them." Emeka stared at her, heart pounding. He realized their quest might not be done. But he felt calm, ready. "You taught me courage," he said. "I will face this too." Aunt Nkairu smiled and drew him into a hug. "Together," she said. "Always together." Emeka nodded, closing his eyes in relief. They stepped outside into the bright morning. The street thrummed with life. Emeka and Aunt Nkairu walked hand in hand toward the school, the shard's cloth pouch safe in Aunt Nkairu's pocket. The first bird song rose behind them, a promise of new beginnings, and the gentle reminder that some shadows never fade entirely.